The message came as I was laying out the silverware for Thanksgiving dinner. My hands froze mid-air when I read the words on my phone. You won't be joining us on the Christmas cruise. Dad would prefer it to be just the family. My mother, Linda, sent it like a weather update. Casual, cold, final. 3 months earlier, I had sold my apartment in Seattle, poured every dollar into buying them a $400,000 house, their safety net. And now I was disposable. My name is Jessa. I'm 34 years old, and that text shattered whatever illusion I had left about family. Before I tell you how far they went to steal my life, let me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe, because that was only the beginning. Growing up, I should have seen the pattern, but I kept telling myself it was just family quirks. When I graduated with my MBA, my parents didn't even bother to show up at the ceremony. 2 weeks later, my dad called me, voice shaking, like he was embarrassed. Jessa, I hate to ask, but I've got a chance to invest in this car. Business, 10,000 would save the deal. I wired the money the next morning. That business never existed beyond a brochure and a rented office. Then, the year I landed my first big promotion, I treated myself to a vacation. Before I could book the flights, my mom showed up at my apartment, eyes red, clutching medical bills. Sweetheart, insurance won't cover my procedure. It's urgent. $15,000 later, her procedure turned out to be a kitchen remodel. She even bragged about the granite countertops to her friends, while I canceled my trip quietly. And still, I believed them. Still, I wanted to be the daughter they could finally be proud of. When their heater supposedly broke in the middle of winter, Dad called me at midnight. 3,000. Jessa will freeze without it. I transferred the money. Weeks later, Kelly told me she saw a brand new, state-of-the-art system already installed, shiny enough to be featured in a magazine. Every emergency bled me a little more, not just my bank account, but my hope that one day they'd see me as more than an ATM with a heartbeat. And then came the house, their grand performance. Mom crying real tears as she hugged me, whispering, "You're our hero, Jessa." Dad clapping my back, saying, "We don't know how to thank you." They knew exactly how. By cutting me out the moment the house was secured. By booking cruises and buying BMWs while I rented a one-bedroom. It's cruel how the people who raise you can script the betrayal so convincingly you don't realize you're just financing their happiness. I kept asking myself, how many times had I mistaken exploitation for love? How long had I confused sacrifice with belonging? But I was about to find out that betrayal had layers I hadn't even begun to peel back. The night after that message, I sat at my kitchen table staring at a blank screen. Outside, the Oregon rain tapped against the window, like a reminder. "Wake up, Jessa, wake up." Kelly texted me. "I'm sorry about the cruise. You know how they are." Her words cut deeper. Then she knew. Because yes, I knew how they were. I just never admitted it aloud. I called her back. She sounded hesitant, almost guilty. "Do you remember your MBA graduation?" she asked. I said yes. "They skipped it because Dad wanted you available when he pitched that car business." I froze. For years I told myself it was my fault they didn't come, that maybe I wasn't worth celebrating. But it wasn't neglect. It was calculation. Kelly's voice softened. "Jessa, they've been using you as their safety net for years. Remember the kitchen remodel? That wasn't sudden. Mom planned it months before." I wanted to scream. Instead, I just stared at the documents on my laptop, the property deed, bank transfers, every receipt with my name. And then came the micro twist. While digging through the mortgage papers, I found a record I had overlooked. 2 months before their desperate call, to me, they had already refinanced the house. $80,000. Quietly pulled out. Quietly spent. They hadn't been drowning when they called me. They had already built themselves a raft and wanted me to build them a yacht. I sat there, hands trembling, realizing the heater, emergency, the medical bills, the foreclosure, all theater. And I had been the audience who kept paying for tickets. That night, I created a new folder on my computer. I named it Project Consequences. Inside, I started cataloging every lie, every manipulation, every penny they extracted from me with practiced tears. Not to wallow, not to cry, to document. Because the girl who once wired money at midnight was gone. What remained was a woman, with proof and patience. I spent hours building timelines, transfers lined up, with sudden vacations, Emergencies followed by new appliances. Even the words they used were recycled. You've always been our hero. You've always come through. Hero, bank, pawn, call it what you want. The truth was simple. They never intended to. Treat me like family. At dawn, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. My eyes weren't swollen from crying. They were sharp, alert, calculating. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. Anger is messy, loud. What I felt was colder, determined, because I understood something terrifying that night. If they could fabricate a foreclosure, what else could they fabricate? And I was about to find out. 3 days later, as I scrolled through my parents' vacation photos, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. Jessa, this is Tom Bradley from Bradley and Associates. Your father gave me your contact. My stomach dropped. Why would Dad's lawyer be calling me? Tom continued. Your parents asked us to prepare paperwork for the Elm Street property. They said you'd agreed to transfer ownership back into their names officially. For a second, I couldn't even breathe. I never agreed to that, I said finally. Silence crackled through the line. Tom cleared his throat. Well, they seemed sure. Said it was a gift you intended for them. Just a formality. A gift. $400,000. My savings. My apartment. My future. Now repackaged as a gift they could legally steal. That night, Kelly showed up at my apartment. She wasn't empty-handed. She dropped a manila folder on my table and whispered, You need to see this. Inside were tax documents, refinancing statements, even a boat registration in Dad's name. A $25,000 Favoritism boat hidden 40 miles away. But that wasn't the worst part. Kelly slid one more paper across the table. A life insurance application Mom had filed last month. $200,000. With me as the sole beneficiary. I frowned. Isn't that good? Kelly's face turned pale. Jessa, she's healthy. She's at 62. Why would she suddenly take out a policy that large? Don't you see? If something happened to them, you'd look like you had the perfect motive. It hit me like ice water down my spine. They weren't just stealing. They were setting me up. If I fought back, if I exposed them, they could point to that policy and say I had reason to harm them. Outside, children played in the park, their laughter floating through the window. The sound made my skin crawl. Normal families existed, just not mine. Kelly's voice cracked. They've turned you into both, a resource and a suspect. I pressed my hands against the table to steady myself. My parents, my own parents, were building a trap where every road ended with me, branded the villain. It was more than betrayal. It was premeditation. And for the first time in 34 years, I saw them clearly. Not as parents, but as predators. The realization didn't shatter me. It crystallized me. Because if they had calculated my downfall, then I needed to calculate my survival. And survival, I knew, would not come from silence. They thought they'd written the final chapter of my story. But I was about to pick up the pen myself. Margaret Morrison leaned back in her chair, her silver hair catching the light. Jessa, you have a strong case. Fraud. Financial coercion. Even attempted defamation of character. But you need to be ready. This will get brutal. I nodded. They made it brutal when they decided to frame me. She outlined a plan in 3 phases. Phase May. 1. Lock down every account. Phase 2. Gather irrefutable evidence. Phase 3. Implement consequences proportional to their actions. By the next morning, every bank account authorization was revoked. Every transaction over $50 required my personal approval. The house, my house, was legally untouchable. Meanwhile, James Crawford, the private investigator, reconstructed every transaction. Heater emergency matched with spa receipts. Medical bill lined up perfectly with cosmetic procedures. Dad's fake investments, a cover for his boat payments. I didn't just have evidence. I had a story the courts would understand. When my parents returned from their cruise, they dragged glossy luggage across the driveway and discovered their keys didn't work. I watched from my car across the street as Dad rattled the knob, then pulled out his phone. 2 minutes later, mine rang. Jessa, the lock's broken. We can't get inside. I kept my voice calm. The lock isn't broken. You don't live there anymore. Silence. Then Mom's voice, sharp with panic. Stop playing games. Open the door now. I can't open a door to a house. That doesn't belong to me anymore, I replied. They stood frozen on the porch, faces pale, before I told them to meet me at Denny's 1 hour. When they walked in, they looked wrecked. Sunburnt, wrinkled clothes, eyes swollen from stress. I slid a folder across the booth table. Inside, bank statements, refinancing documents, the boat registration, and that life insurance application. Dad's hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. Mom whispered, "You investigated your own parents?" I leaned forward. "You tried to frame your own daughter." Investigation was the least I could do. Dad's jaw tightened. "What do you want, Jessa?" The question I'd been waiting for. "I want consequences. Lawsuits. Restitution. You stole years of my life and every dollar I saved. Now you're going to pay it back." Mom's face drained of color. "You'd put your own parents in jail?" "I'd put thieves in jail," I said, standing. I left the folder on the table, behind me. I heard Dad's voice crack. "Where are we supposed to sleep tonight?" I stopped at the door. "You're adults. You planned every detail of my downfall. I'm sure you can plan where to sleep." Their silence followed me out into the night. For the first time, I wasn't the disposable daughter. I was the one in control. But control was only the beginning. 6 months later, Margaret called. Her voice carried a smile. "They've accepted the settlement, full repayment, plus damages. And they've waived any future claims on you or your assets." I set down my coffee and stared out at Portland's skyline. For the first time in years, the weight on my chest felt lighter. Kelly stopped by that afternoon with lattes and news. They moved into a tiny one-bedroom on the east side. Dad's stocking shelves at Walmart. Mom's, well, let's just say manipulation isn't exactly a job skill. The boat? Sold to pay their lawyers. BMW? Returned to the dealer. Their empire of lies had collapsed into a rented apartment with peeling paint. 3 days later, Mom called me. Her voice was softer, older. "Jessa, we just wanted to say we're sorry. Maybe someday we could try again?" I closed my eyes, choosing each word carefully. "Mom, you need to learn how to live without my money before you learn how to live with me." I hung up, and for once, didn't feel guilty. That month, I launched a consulting business helping others recognize and protect themselves from family fraud. Kelly became my first employee. She asked me one night, "Don't you feel angry anymore?" I smiled. "No, I feel grateful." They taught me the difference between being loved and being used. That lesson is worth more than any house. 2 years later, my business thrived. I was no longer the daughter begging for approval. Was the woman who built her own foundation. My parents? They finally learned the true value of money when it was theirs, not mine. Sometimes the greatest kindness you can give is letting someone face the consequences of their choices. Because only when you stop being someone's savior do they learn to save themselves. If you've ever had to set boundaries with family, share your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, because these aren't just stories. They're reminders that survival can turn into strength, and strength into freedom.